The smell hit me before anything else. Fresh paint, neon pink, seeping under a door that used to be mine. Standing in the doorway, I held a sealed envelope, 2 first-class cruise tickets I'd driven through a blizzard to deliver. My fingers were still numb from the parking lot. Warren. My dad sat in his armchair. Red wine, slow swirl. The posture of a man who'd already made every decision and was mildly bored, waiting for the formalities to finish. Lorraine. My mom kept her eyes on her phone. "We need the space," she said. "Celeste is building her brand. I'm sure you understand." 3 black garbage bags sat in the hallway. My clothes, my books, my life, packed by someone else's hands. I looked at Warren. He swirled the glass. I set the envelope on the hall table, the tickets, still sealed, right where they could find them whenever they chose to look. Then I picked up all 3 bags and walked back out into the snow. The motel heater sounded like it was losing a fight with itself, something rattling inside it, slow and uneven, like it stopped caring whether it won. I dropped all 3 bags on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. The carpet was the color of something that used to be beige. The blizzard pressed against the window in slow, heavy waves. Work was the one thing that made sense when everything else dissolved. Numbers stay where you leave them. They don't make decisions based on who raised them. My name is Delia. I'm 28 years old. I sell houses for a living, which means I understand exactly what a deed transfer looks like. Warren didn't. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I grew up in that house, paid rent to live in it, starting at 16. Lorraine called it a household contribution. Every paycheck I earned from every job I worked through high school and into my early 20s, a cut came off the top before I ever touched it. Warren sat at the kitchen table on collection days, with a glass in his hand, nodding without looking up. That was the full extent of his involvement. A nod, nothing else. And every birthday, after the candles, he'd look at me with those flat, hollow eyes and deliver the same line. "You cost me a meeting that changed men's lives. You started with a negative balance. Not in anger. He said it the way you'd read a sentence aloud to confirm it still made sense. Every year, without fail. Part of me kept waiting for the one time he'd skip it. He never did. The year I turned 20, I paid on time for 12 months straight. Warren pulled me aside and told me I was finally starting to pull my weight. No card, no dinner, just confirmation that the debt had been serviced on schedule. That was the only praise he ever gave me. Not for anything I'd built or become, just for paying, on time, what he'd decided I owed. The birthday speeches weren't cruelty, they were maintenance. A debt you can never fully repay is a leash that never runs out of length. He needed me to keep believing I owed him. The moment that belief ran out, the payment stopped. The whole arrangement collapsed, which is exactly what happened. They saw thrift store clothes and a sedan with a heater, just like this one. They saw a woman barely keeping up on real estate commissions, always a little stretched. That picture was comfortable for them, so I kept it. They never saw the tax returns. Outside, the blizzard pressed against the glass. The room sat dark and still. Somewhere around 2 a.m, the daughter who'd spent her whole life waiting to be chosen stepped quietly aside. The woman who was going to run the numbers took her seat. I reached into the bag for my work laptop. My hand closed on empty air. I unzipped every pocket, ran my fingers all the way to the bottom of each one. Nothing. My phone was already in my hand. Find my device. The blue dot steadied on a location 6 blocks from my parents' house, Easy Cash Pawn and Loan on 5th Street, still open, which told me everything I needed to know about the kind of night this was shaping up to be. I drove there through sleet so thick the road markings had disappeared. The man behind the counter didn't look up. I gave him the serial number from my records. "Store policy," he said. "No ticket, no item." I went back out to the parking lot and tore through all 3 garbage bags, right there on the asphalt, my clothes, my shoes, my books hitting the grey slush until I found it. A crumpled yellow receipt, folded inside a pair of jeans in the second bag, coffee-stained, time-stamped 3:42 that afternoon. More than an hour before I'd knocked on their door, Lorraine had gone through my bags before she packed them. $800 to buy back my own property. I paid it without letting it show on my face. At the counter, I smoothed the receipt, flat against the glass. The man handed back the laptop. I folded that yellow slip and zipped it into my jacket pocket. I was going to keep it. Not as a trophy. As a fact. Back in the car, a second notification lit up my phone. DMV. Transfer of liability. My sedan, bought with my own cash 5 years ago, kept in Warren's name to save on insurance because I was careful like that had been sold at 4:15 that afternoon. 40 minutes before I arrived. The buyer already had the keys. Warren had sat back down in his armchair in time to swirl his wine while I was pulling into their driveway to give him a vacation. I called Lorraine. She answered on the second ring, the way you'd pick up a call you'd been expecting but found mildly inconvenient. "We raised you," she said. "Consider it repayment. Celeste's party planner needed a deposit." Click. I sat in that parking lot for a long time. The heater wheezed. The sleet came back. Something inside me shifted. Not broke, closed. The way a door closes when someone finally stops expecting company. I'd been keeping bank records since I was 19, not for any specific reason at the time, just because I was the kind of person who kept things. Every rent payment Lorraine had logged against me since I was 16, she'd given each one a name. Household contribution, maintenance fee. Her accounting was meticulous. She just never considered that mine was too. 12 years of it. Every receipt accounted for. They drained me dry because they thought dry was all there was. They were wrong. Back at the motel desk, I pulled up the kind of financial profile I run before any foreclosure adjacent, listing the full picture, not just what people want you to see. 3 refinancings in 5 years. 4 credit lines maxed to the ceiling. And there, 30 days old, a notice of default filed with the county. They weren't cutting back to fund Celeste's brand. They were 30 days from losing the house entirely, desperate enough to accept almost any lifeline that came wrapped in the right packaging. I wasn't looking for leverage. I was looking at the truth. The truth turned out to be leverage. I called Mr. Ames, an attorney I'd worked alongside 2 years earlier on a complicated estate transfer, a man who understood distressed assets and owed me a professional favor. I explained what I needed, an outreach call, in his capacity as a financial consultant, to a couple facing imminent foreclosure. Standard industry practice, completely legitimate. He agreed. Lorraine did her homework first. That matters. She wasn't careless. She called the number. She checked the firm's profile online. She spent real time on the website, the way anyone would when something valuable was on the line. Then she told Warren it checked out. That's the difference between them and a cartoon villain. They weren't stupid. They were hungry. And hungry people read what they need to see. Mr. Ames sent the initial request, standard documentation, to assess their financial position. Specifically, the most recent loan application, pending with their current lender. Routine. The kind of thing any financial advisor asks for up front. Warren drafted a reply. Then he stopped. 20 minutes later, his number came through on Mr. Ames' phone. He had one question, not about terms, not about interest rates. He wanted to know whether the silent investor had experience specifically backing influencer brands, because Celeste's model was unique, and he had no intention of associating her with the wrong kind of capital. Mr. Ames confirmed the investor had backed 3 digital media companies in the past 2 years and found the space extremely promising. Warren said good and hung up. 11 minutes later, the email landed. The full loan application, his name at the top, his signature at the bottom, and there in the income section, co-applicant, Celeste, annual income, $200,000. Source, brand partnerships. Celeste's brand was a bot-inflated account and a box of unsold merchandise sitting in their garage. She had never earned $200,000. She had never come close. Warren had submitted fabricated income to a federally insured institution to qualify for a loan. He sent it himself, authenticated, signed with his own hand. He almost hadn't. He needed one thing first: confirmation that the money cared about Celeste. The moment he had that, the last gate swung open. That was the tell. He spent no part of that phone call protecting himself. Every second of it went toward protecting her. That was the one protective instinct he'd exercised in 12 years. It had never once pointed in my direction. 3 days later, Warren and Lorraine arrived in their Sunday best. Warren in a suit, one size too tight across the shoulders. Lorraine in a dress that required money she no longer had. Celeste trailed behind them, oversized sunglasses, phone already in hand, already somewhere else entirely. Mr. Ames offered champagne. Warren accepted before the sentence finished. He settled into the leather chair the way a man settles into something he believes he deserves. Chest forward, glass already in motion. Only the best for the Miller family, he said. That glass. That same slow swirl. The same man who hadn't looked up the night I stood in his doorway holding a gift for him. Mr. Ames excused himself to retrieve the silent partner. The room quieted. Celeste scrolled. Warren looked relaxed. Then the doors opened. I walked in wearing a charcoal suit fitted close, hair back, hands steady. None of the camouflage. The kind of entrance you make when you've spent years ensuring no one in that room knew what you were actually capable of. Warren's smile stopped working mid-performance. Lorraine squinted, as though reality had made a clerical error. Celeste looked up from her phone for the first time since she'd sat down. Corey. Warren's voice came out smaller than he'd intended. How did you? He caught himself. Turned to Mr. Ames. She tracked us down. She wants money. Call security. Mr. Ames closed his briefcase. One clean snap. He stayed exactly where he was. I walked to the head of the table, reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a small, crumpled yellow slip, and smoothed it flat against the polished wood with 2 fingers. My pawn ticket, I said. For my laptop. The one Lorraine sold for $800 to cover a party deposit. Nobody spoke. I nodded to Mr. Ames. The projector came on. Warren's loan application filled the wall behind me, his name, his signature, the income section centered and enlarged. Co-applicant, Celeste. Annual income, $200,000. Celeste doesn't make $200,000. The same voice I use when a number in a contract is wrong, and everyone in the room already knows it. She makes 0. You submitted fabricated income to a federally insured institution. That's federal bank fraud. Celeste's phone slid off her lap. Lorraine's hand moved to her throat. Warren opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The same silence, the same open mouth, the same choice he'd been making at kitchen tables and birthday dinners for 12 years. Go quiet, retreat, let someone else carry it. Only this time, there was no one else in the room. Just him, his name on that wall, and the silence that had always been his answer. I filed a suspicious activity report with your bank's fraud department this morning. That's already done. It cannot be unfiled. The loan won't close. The foreclosure will proceed. I laid out the civil conversion claim for the car, the documentation for the laptop. Then I straightened up and checked my watch. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here so you understand what your position actually is. Warren reached for the champagne glass. His hand stopped halfway. He'd built every beam of this himself and walked straight into it in his Sunday best, swirling a glass someone else had poured for him. He thought he was playing against a daughter. He had no idea he was sitting across from someone who spends her professional life knowing exactly when a property is already lost. They left quietly, 3 people absorbing information too large for the room, moving toward the exit without a word. 1 week of silence. Then the calls started. A cousin, an aunt, someone I hadn't spoken to in 4 years. Lorraine had been busy constructing an alternate version of events. A manipulative daughter, 2 vulnerable elderly parents, an abused professional license. A formal complaint landed with the Ohio Division of Real Estate and Professional Licensing. I let it sit for 3 days. Then I called Mr. Ames. 1 letter, 2 paragraphs, attached. Warren's original email timestamped, sent willingly to a financial consultant who had requested standard documentation during a routine consultation. I was absent from that call entirely. I had received a document Warren authored and transmitted with his own hands. The board reviewed it. The complaint closed. Mr. Ames sent his invoice that same afternoon. I paid it in full before the end of the business day. When he called to confirm, he said, "I hope this is the last time you need me for something like this." A professional thing to say, Also true. Some people come into your life for exactly one chapter. 4 months later, the foreclosure auction. I'd been depositing a fixed percentage of every paycheck into a credit union account since I was 22 under a P.O. box address, my name only. The exit fund. Not because I planned to leave, because I always understood I might need to. The balance was ready. I won the house at public sale. Legally, recorded, permanent. I walked through it once before listing it, stopped at the pink bedroom door, left the paint exactly as it was. It sold in 11 days. The movers found the cruise ticket envelope on the hall table, sealed, untouched, right where I'd placed it the night I walked out. I donated the tickets to a women's shelter fundraiser. I hope whoever used them went somewhere warm. Then I opened my contacts. Warren, Lorraine, Celeste. 3 taps, 3 silences, the kind that don't need explaining. The thing about systems built on exploitation is that they require constant maintenance. The moment the source walks away, the whole structure starts failing on its own. By the time the foreclosure completed, Warren and Lorraine had exhausted every option available to them. The bank's fraud department referred the application to their compliance division. An investigation opened. Facing the prospect of federal charges, they agreed to a civil settlement, $32,000 in penalties, and full cooperation with the bank's internal audit. They kept their freedom. They lost the house, their credit, and whatever remained of their financial standing. Celeste's career evaporated the month the settlement became public. No investor funds, no party planners. She was selling designer bags online to cover her expenses by spring. The neighbors stopped waving. The extended family, once so quick to call me on Lorraine's behalf, went quiet when the details came out. Some people only show up for a version of events that lets them feel righteous. When that version fell apart, they found somewhere else to be. The civil judgment on the car, $38,000, cleared 6 weeks after the auction, the same afternoon it landed. 3 months after I listed the house, a voicemail appeared from Lorraine. Her voice was lower than I remembered, less certain of itself. She said it wasn't right. She said family doesn't do this to each other. She said she was still my stepmother regardless of what any piece of paper decided. I listened to it once, all the way through. Then I deleted it. Warren sent a message through a cousin 2 weeks later, just that he hoped I was doing well. I blocked the cousin. Not from anger, from clarity. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from leaving a door open for people who've already shown you exactly what they do when they walk through it. My new apartment has a kitchen window that faces east. The light comes in early, and I've started waking up with it. No alarm, no voices, no one in the next room recalculating what I owe. A colleague invited me to her family's Thanksgiving last November. I nearly said no out of old habit, the kind of reflex that builds after too many years in rooms where your presence was tolerated rather than genuinely wanted. She texted back before I could decline. There's a seat with your name on it, literally. I made place cards. I sat at that table for 3 hours, ate too much, laughed at things that weren't particularly funny, and meant it anyway. Nobody mentioned what I'd contributed, what I was earning, or what I owed anyone. That is what chosen family looks like. Not blood, not obligation, just people who set a place for you before you arrive. Now I want to speak to you directly. Not to summarize what happened, you already know how it ended. I want to talk about what it actually was, because this story is easy to misread as being about revenge. It wasn't. It was about infrastructure. Warren and Lorraine built a system that required my participation to function. Not my enthusiasm, not my agreement, just enough compliance to keep the payments coming, the receipts unpresented, and the exit fund unnamed. The moment I stopped complying, the structure failed under its own weight. I didn't tear it down. I walked out of it. Gravity handled the rest. Here is what I learned. Rule 1. Silence repeated across years in the face of someone's pain is not neutrality, it is a position. Warren never raised his voice at me. He swirled his glass, nodded, and said nothing while I was diminished inside a house I helped maintain, year after year. For a long time, I read that silence as something I could change, evidence that he was conflicted, proof that somewhere beneath the wine glass There was a father who wanted to choose differently. The year I turned 20, I paid rent on time for 12 consecutive months. He told me I was finally starting to pull my weight. That was the only acknowledgement he ever gave me, not for anything I'd built or become, just for servicing a debt on schedule. The birthday speeches weren't cruelty. They were maintenance. A debt you can never fully retire is a leash that never runs out of length. His silence was a vote cast the same way every single time. Stop trying to revise a verdict that was never based on evidence to begin with. Rule 2. Protecting what you've built from people who've demonstrated they will extract it is not secrecy, it is self-preservation. I drove that car on purpose. I wore those clothes on purpose. Not from shame, from knowledge. The specific kind that comes from watching your resources get redistributed the moment they become visible. The camouflage was right. The exit fund was right. You are fully entitled to keep parts of your life private from people who've shown you, through repeated behavior, exactly what they do with access. You don't owe transparency to people who treat transparency as a shopping list. Rule 3. You rarely need to destroy people who are already destroying themselves. Your job is simply to make sure you're not still standing inside the building when it comes down. That's why I walked out without a word the night of the eviction. The argument was already resolved, I just hadn't witnessed the conclusion yet. Everything that followed was paperwork. The house is sold. The pink room belongs to someone else now. I don't follow what Warren and Lorraine are doing. I no longer think about the glass. What stays with me is the click of that deadbolt on the way out for the last time, the sound of a lock that finally meant what locks are supposed to mean. Not keeping you in, keeping others out. I slept through the night after the auction. No alarm, no guilt, no voice in the next room deciding what I owed. Just the quiet of a life that belongs entirely to itself. If you've ever stood in a hallway holding something you worked for, while someone told you it still wasn't enough, drop a comment and tell me. What was the moment you understood the account was closed? And if you haven't reached that moment yet, what number are you still waiting to hit before you believe you've paid enough? Share this with someone who needs Rule 2 today. Someone still wearing the camouflage, still building the exit fund in silence, still waiting to be seen by people who've already decided not to look. I want to see how far this story travels.